This is the Energy Education Podcast for January 20th, 2013. I'm Kevin Hurley. This podcast is a project of Fairewinds Energy Education. Fairewinds is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to educate policymakers, the public, and the next generation on issues of nuclear power and safety. For most of our shows, we bring you a conversation between Arnie and I. On today's show, however, we're doing something a little different. Last week, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's Petition Review Board heard testimony from Friends of the Earth and Fairewinds' Arnie Gundersen, who is retained as an expert witness by Friends of the Earth. The topic of conversation, the San Onofre nuclear plant. Now, what follows is an audio recording from that meeting. Our apologies, though, as the quality of the recording is not the best.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Rodriguez, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending the Category 3 public meeting. The meeting is to allow the petitioner, Friends of the Earth, represented by Mr. Richard Ayers, to address the NRC Petition Review Board, also referred to as the PRB, regarding the 2.206 petition dated June 18, 2012. This is a Category 3 public meeting where the public is normally invited to participate in the meetings by providing comments and asking questions throughout the meeting. In this instance, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions pertaining only to the 10 CFR 2.206 processes after the petitioner completes his application to the PRB. The purpose of this meeting is to provide the petitioner with an opportunity to address the NRC Petition Review Board. The portion of that original petition that the NRC is tasked with is your claim that the Southern California Edison violated 10 CFR 50.59 when the steam generators were replaced in 2010 and 2011. Brian Benny is a petition manager for the petition, and Dr. Sher Bahadur is the Petition Review Board chairman. Dr. Bahadur will provide you with the meeting details and petition process. As part of the PRB's review of the petition, the petitioner was offered an initial opportunity to address the PRB to provide any relevant additional explanation and support for the petition. Mr. Ayers requested this opportunity to provide supplemental information and support for the petition before the PRB meets internally to make the initial recommendation to accept or reject the petition for review. This meeting is scheduled for 1.5 hours. The meeting is being recorded by the NRC Operations Center and will be transcribed by a court reporter. The transcript will become a supplement to the petition. Prior to placing the transcript in Adams, the PRB will review it to ensure that it does not contain any allegations or sensitive information. There are some meeting ground rules to discuss. This is a recorded line, so we ask that only one person speak at a time. We ask that everyone respect and not interrupt the person speaking. Because this meeting is limited in time, we are going to allow approximately 1 minute for questions or concerns by each individual of the public. The NRC operator will supervise the telephone lines and allow only one person to speak at a time. I'd like to emphasize that you need to speak clearly and loudly to ensure that the court reporter can accurately transcribe this meeting. When doing so, please state your name and any affiliation. For individuals attending the meeting, public meeting feedback forms are available to fill out over on the side of the meeting room. You may either leave them here at the conclusion of the meeting or mail them back. The forms are postage paid. If you are participating by phone and would like to email your questions or provide feedback on this public meeting, please forward your comments to the petition manager by email at brian.benny, B-E-N-N.
I'm sorry, this feature is disabled.
I'd like to open the meeting with introductions of the NRC PRB members. I ask that all of the members clearly state your name, your title or position, and your organization. For those in attendance, please speak clearly so that the court reporter can accurately record your name and statement. For those dialing into the meeting, please remember to state your name and any affiliation. Once again, the NRC operator will maintain line supervision, and we ask that you speak clearly for the court reporter. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the PRB chairman, Dr. Sher Bahadur.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting regarding the 2.206 petition submitted by Mr. Richard Ayers, Council of Friends of the Earth. And we are fortunate that it's raining outside, so So sitting inside, we don't feel that bad. We have this meeting scheduled for about an hour and a half, and we would like to see that if the proceedings go smoothly, then I promise that we'll complete that in time. I'd first like to share some background of this process. And please bear with me because it's tedious.
This is Greg Warner, Region 4. We're on another bridge. It's not connected.
Here. So I'm going to be reading some of these
Good luck
for you. Section 2.06 of Title 10 of the Code of Federal Register Regulations describes the petition process, and that's the primary mechanism for the public to request enforcement action by the NRC in a public process. This process permits anyone to petition NRC to take enforcement action type related to NRC licensee or licensed activity. Depending on the results of this evaluation, NRC could modify, suspend, or revoke the NRC-issued license, or take any other appropriate enforcement action to resolve it. The NRC staff guidance for the disposition of 2.06 petition request is in the Management Directive 8.11, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. It's publicly available also. The purpose of today's meeting is to give the petitioner, that's the gentleman in front of me and the ladies, an opportunity to provide an additional support for the petition. The petition review board's initial.
Excuse me, this is Greg Warner, Region 4. Can you hear me?
So, in that sense,
I can hear you. The volume is very low for the speaker.
To question or examine the PRBs.
Please move. We need to have another bridge cross-connected.
The petition request. Decisions regarding the merit of this petition will be made in this meeting.
Before this bridge line is muted,
this meeting, the
conference room, you have to call in.
It's internal deliberations, and the outcome of that internal meeting will be discussed with the petitioner.
Is that better, sir?
I can hear you, but I can't hear anything else, ma'am.
I just muted that line that person was speaking on.
No, we can't hear anything.
We've lost the meeting.
Well, I can open up the line again, but
yes,
then
please.
They're not hearing anyone.
Well,
put
up everyone.
Yeah, I don't want to hear us talking.
We can't hear anything now either. Everybody's been cut off.
The rulemaking is responsible for the process of the petition.
Well, there's 47 lines connected to this call right now.
Brian Benny, on my right, is the petition manager. Mary Bennett is the petition coordinator for the petition under discussion today. Our technical and regional staff include David Bellew, which is also in the office of NRR, and Mr. Art Howell from the NRC Region 4 office. Art? Mr. Greg Warner from the NRC Region 4 office. Is he online? And he is on telephone. In addition, we obtain advice from the Office of General Counsel, which is represented by Ms. Molly Bartman-Marsh, which is on my left. So as described in our process, the NRC staff may ask clarifying questions in order to better understand the petitioner's presentation and to reach a reasoned decision whether to accept or reject the petitioner's request for review under the 2.206 process. Also, as described in our process, the licensees have been invited to participate in today's meeting to ensure that they understand the concern about their facility or activities, which are sitting on my left. While the licensees may also ask questions to clarify the issues raised by the petitioner, I want to stress that the licensees are not a part of the PRB's decision-making process. So I would like to summarize the PRB's understanding of the scope of the petition under consideration and also the NRC's activity to date. On November 8, 2012, the U.S. NRC approved the Memorandum of Order, which was CLI-12-20, to address the intervention petition where the Friends of the Earth argued that Southern California Edison violated 10 Title 10 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 5059, when the steam generator for San Onofre Nuclear Genetic Station, Unit 2 and 3 were replaced in 2010 and 2011 without a license amendment. So FOE requested a hearing on its 10 CFR 5059 claim and asked that its petition not be construed as a request for enforcement relief under 10 CFR 2.206. In a subsequent submittal, FOE stated that the 10 CFR 2.206 process was not a viable alternative for obtaining relief. The Commission disagreed and referred this portion of the FOE's petition to the Executive Director of Operations for consideration as a petition under 10 CFR 2.206. So the purpose of this meeting is to provide the petitioner with an opportunity to address the NRC Petition Review Board, which I just introduced, pursuant to 10 CFR 2.206, specifically to allow the petitioner to present the information regarding the 5059 process that the licensee followed in order to replace these steam generators. Now, your original petition argues that the Southern California Edison violated 10 CFR 5059 when these steam generators were replaced in 2010 and 2011. And of course, you elaborate that further. So the petition requests that the NRC, I'm still continuing the summary. So the petitioner requests that the NRC undertake a license amendment proceedings, including the educatory public hearing required under 10 CFR 2.09, hearing request, petitions to intervene, requirements for standing and contentions. So to date, the petitioner submitted the petition to NRC on July 30, 2012. The Commission responded on November 8, 2012. And on December 10, 2012, Mr. Brian Benny, petition manager, on my right, contacted Mr. Ayers to inform him of the NRC's receipt of petition in the 2.206 process. Mr. Ayers requested an opportunity to address the PRB in a public meeting, which is what is the purpose of today's meeting. So as a reminder for the meeting participants, please identify yourself if you make any remarks. This will help us in the preparation for the meeting transcript that will be made publicly available. In addition, the NRC staff verified that there was no security-related information contained within the petition. Since this is a public meeting, I would like to remind the PRB members, the licensees, the petitioner, and other meeting participants of the need to refrain from discussing any NRC security-related information during today's public meeting. So, Mr. Ayers, I'd like to turn it over to you to allow you to provide any additional information you believe the PRB should consider as part of this petition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Ayers, and I represent Friends of the Earth in this matter. We're here because of the concern of the organization, Friends of the Earth, its members, and others in Southern California about the safety of operating San Onofre in its present condition. Under the Commission's order, this body is to consider whether enforcement action should be taken against Edison. And by the way, I want to note that we're, of course, aware of Edison's filing of about a week ago, I think it was, and we plan to respond with a filing on paper to that earlier. So to the extent we don't discuss or respond to any arguments in the Edison filing, they will be responded to in our subsequent filing. We have concluded that Edison violated the NRC Regulation 10 CFR 5059 when it chose not to seek a license for the replacement steam generators at San Onofre.
Oh, yeah.
We're here today to explain why we think you should reach the same conclusion. We also want to
I just said I wanted a small civilian drone.
Please mute your phone on the bridge line, please.
In response to Edison's violation of the regulation. There'll be two presenters today, myself and Arnie Gundersen to my left. Arnie it will explain why the changes made at Edison, in our view, triggered an obligation on the part of Edison to seek a license amendment. Mr. Gundersen is a nuclear engineer with 40 years of experience. He's been a licensed nuclear reactor operator. He also managed and coordinated projects at some 70 nuclear power plants across the country. I think I'd also say that in his earlier expert report filed with our original petition, I think if one looks at that again, you find that he pretty well hit the nail on the head about what happened there. In any case, I'd like to turn it over to Arnie, and when he's completed his presentation, I have a few additional words to say. Arnie?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Arnie Gundersen. For those of you on the phone bridge, it's Gundersen with an E, with Fairewinds, and that has an E in it too. We like E's in Vermont. The presentation I'm about to give is available on the fairewinds.org site. If there's anybody on the phone bridge who'd like to go up to fairewinds.org and click on it, you can follow along. And I understand that apparently the NRC has made it available too. So it's readily available to anyone who wants to follow along. Thank you for having me today. And I will just go slide by slide through the presentation, and we'll skip one, which is a pretty picture of the power plant. Today is a discussion using the 2.206 process to discuss 5059 violations at San Onofre as the plant progressed toward its replacement steam generator process. The sequence, which is slide 3, will be first I'll give a brief chronology of events as I see them. Secondly, I'll discuss the magnitude of the design changes. And thirdly, I'll offer up some conclusions. So let's get right into it. Chronology of events. I'm on slide 5. It's important to know that according to Edison's annual report and lots of other references, Edison applied in 2004, early in 2004, to the California Public Utilities Commission to have the steam generators replaced. And later in 2004, the end of September, they placed an order with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. I'll probably just call them Mitsubishi. As the owner of 5 Mitsubishis in my life, I should go on record as having bought their product in the past. But more importantly is that this was a fixed price contract, and the price was determined in 2004. The Public Utilities Commission was told it would be around $670 million total, not all to Mitsubishi, but for the entire process. So the price was known to the parties early in 2004. Slide 6 now. An Edison employee provided us at Friends of the Earth with portions of the design specification for the replacement steam generators at San Onofre. The specification number is SO 23-617-1, and the individuals that were involved in developing the specification are listed in slide 6. Most importantly, though, the specification required that 5059 would not apply for San Onofre. So even before the bid was given to Mitsubishi, the decision had been made by Edison that 5059 would not apply. Now, to my opinion, slide 7, that's putting the cart before the horse. Slide 8 really gets into the specific sections of the design specification that we were given by an Edison employee that really speak to the issue of the intent of Edison even before the design was finalized. Section 3611 says that Edison's intent was to replace the generators under 5059, but that the supplier shall guarantee in writing that the design is licensable and provide all support necessary. And finally, that any deviations from these requirements require Edison approval. Sorry. The slide 9, I think, has the key paragraph in it, and it's from 3.6.2 from the Edison design specification. And it states that the supplier, ultimately that was to be Mitsubishi, but at the time this was given, all the bidders were aware of it, would be provide a licensing topical report that demonstrate compliance with the RSG design. The report shall include an engineering evaluation including all necessary analyses that justifies that the RSGs can be replaced under 5059 without prior NRC approval. So sometime at the end of 03 when the spec was made, and certainly in 04 when the bids were let, the decision had already been made by Edison that no NRC approval would be required and that the licensee was required to provide, that Edison was required to provide a topical report to that, stating that. The final evaluation, though, was Edison's. Moving on in time, the public record indicates that the official notification of the NRC was in June of 06. The kickoff meeting, if you will, was requested by Edison in June of 06. Slide 11 and subsequent slides are from that presentation. So in June of 06, there are, by the way, no notes in the public document room about this. As a matter of fact, this presentation from 06 wasn't in the public document room until several months ago when I went looking for it. So there really is no public record of what went on in this meeting except for these several slides. The most important issue is the slide that starts with licensing, and that the statement is that it'll be implemented under 5059. Now, that's all we know based on the statement, but clearly that could be read as we've completed a thorough engineering analysis and we've determined that 5059 doesn't apply. In 2006, that may be what could be read into the record, or it could also mean that you were told that we haven't completed the analysis, but we've already determined that 5059 doesn't apply. The record isn't clear. It is clear from this that it was discussed, but there's nothing in Friends of the Earth's possession to indicate any more detail than that. We have filed a FOIA 6 months ago on information related to this, and to date we have no additional information from the FOIA. The slide 12 is also interesting. This is again from the Edison presentation in 2006. It talks about improvements in the design which are compared to the original steam generators. The two I'd like to highlight is that they claim to have improved the AVB design. AVB stands for anti-vibration bars. And also that they improved the materials in the tube supports. There's other issues on that sheet, but the two that will come back into the discussion a little later are the AVB design, quote, improvements and the materials for the tube support. I also call your attention to the picture. This is a picture of the generators being built in 2006. So while the NRC was notified for the very first time in June of 2006, clearly the process was well along the way, and these generators were substantially into the construction process. Another slide, which I didn't include, also talks about the procurement of tubes, which occurred very early in the process, so that key design decisions had been made in 04, 05, and certainly before this meeting in 06. So one would hope that the 5059 decision that licensing didn't apply would have been completed before they started to build these enormous vessels. My slide 13 is also important because in the kickoff meeting, Edison assumed responsibility for this project. Although it was being built by Mitsubishi, they clearly said that they were retaining oversight responsibility, including doing design reviews, technical meetings. They had resident personnel on site, special engineering visits, readiness reviews, independent inspections, and audits. So Edison clearly was the person that was responsible for the design and the fabrication of this, and they told the NRC so at the very first meeting. Okay, moving on to my slide 14 is that I believe that the contract constrained Mitsubishi Heavy Industries on the issue of the 5059 process. Somewhere between 04, when the contract was awarded to Mitsubishi, and the kickoff meeting in 06, it seems to me that MHI had to force the replacement steam generator analysis and design in order to support the previous decision, the earlier decision that 5059 would not apply. Again, the cart was before the horse, and Mitsubishi analysis had to substantiate what the contract required as opposed to the other way around. My slide 15 refers to the Edison letter you got last week. Edison says on page 5 of their letter that NEI 9607, which is the approved NRC process for 5059, clearly states that changes are a multi-step process. The first step of the process, according to Edison, is that the licensee must determine that the proposed change is safe and effective through appropriate engineering and technical evaluations. I have no problem with that statement. That's not what happened at San Onofre. The contractual language was in place before the engineering analysis was begun. And we know that because of the contract requirements that were provided to us by an Edison employee. So there was no appropriate engineering and technical evaluation performed by Edison when the contract was written and the decision on 5059 had already been made. The die was cast in 2003 or 2004. My slide 16. Moving on in time, we've come to 2009, at which point Edison is applying for standard technical specification change. And Edison was asked in an RAI, a request for additional information, to make some comparisons, which they provided to the NRC. The slide 17 is some of the information that Edison provided to the NRC that was in response to NRC RAIs. The middle column is Edison information, but the ratio is done by Fairewinds. So those numbers, the 23,100, come from information Edison provided, but then the actual division of the two numbers, comparing the replacement steam generator to the original, are Fairewinds. So the rightmost column, percent differences, indicate some very significant changes between the original steam generator and the replacement steam generators. You know, I'll call your attention to a couple. The secondary volume to cover the tubes in one steam generator was a 14% increase. 7% heavier, 100,000 pounds. Cold pipe coolant mass, 13% increase. These kinds of increases clearly, to me, indicate that they should have fired off the NRC's warning system saying that this really doesn't look like for like. Now, it's about 6 years too late in the process. By 2009, at least the Unit 2 steam generators were being shipped across the Pacific, but there was an indication of some huge changes in those generators that was in the NRC's possession before the plants were started up. My slide 18. Edison and MHI co-authored a report that touts all the design changes that were implemented at San Onofre. This was published in the major magazine, and there's a list of literally dozens of major changes. This is the first time, 2011, when the public became aware of the magnitude of the changes in the replacement steam generator process. Now, I've been through the PDR, and I can't find any substantive discussions on the magnitude of the change. There are 4 reports on the Fairewinds website relating to the changes that Edison made, and I think that we'll just reference those. We've got 4 reports we'd like to get on the record about those changes, as well as the affidavit that I submitted last week on the other issue covered by the ASLB. So we'll provide those. But this Edison report identifies that they were removing the stay cylinder, that they were adding 377 tubes, that they were changing the tube support structure, that they were adding new anti-vibration bars, and dozens of other changes. So it's 2011 when the public first became aware of the magnitude of the changes. In a co-authored report by MHI and Edison. And then, of course, it came the failures at the beginning of 2012. Section 2 moves on to what is the magnitude of these design changes that were really made to these generators? Were they small? Was it really like for like? And should 5059 should the NRC have been noticed as opposed to the 5059 process determining that these were like for like and the NRC didn't have to know? Should the NRC have been noticed? My slide 20. John Large, who's also a consultant with Friends of the Earth, and I both agree that in and of themselves, Edison's design changes to the replacement steam generators should have triggered a 5059 review by the NRC. Now, the steam generator tubes and the tube sheet are part of the containment boundary on the PWR. They prevent the radioactive fluids from going from the primary containment, from the primary system over to the secondary. So clearly they're safety related. Also in this process, we have to remember that back in 2006, Edison claimed to the NRC that they had, quote, improved their anti-vibration bars. And that these, I'm assuming, because there are no notes from that meeting, that the improvements would reduce wear inside those steam generators. The original the original steam generators that San Onofre experienced a lot of denting at the top because of the old design, and Edison claimed that the new anti-vibration bars were improvements. Now, I think that's a euphemism. Frankly, I think improved is another way of saying it's a test or an experiment, in which case it should fall under 5059. But clearly it was important enough that at the very first meeting with you back in 2006, the NRC was told that the AVBs had been, quote, improved.
my slide 22 is very long and very busy, and I won't spend much time on it. But it lists the 8 criteria on the left side, and across the top it lists 8 changes that were identified by Mitsubishi and Edison in their paper that they published in 2011. Now, in this table, green is good, so no is good, red, yes, is bad. So 8 by 8 is 64, and I count 39 yeses, which is 39 opportunities where the 50-59 process should have been noticed to the NRC. Now, some of those may have been legitimately filtered out, and I can appreciate that. However, the odds of 39 out of 64 of them being legitimately filtered out by the Edison process, given the fact that they had already determined in 03 that what the answer was, that to me is unbelievable. I want to focus on just four of the columns: the stay cylinder issue, the changes in the tubes, the tube supports, and additional tubes. Those are the first 3 columns in that table. So my slide 23. I don't believe that MHI, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, should be made the scapegoat. In Edison's letter to you just last week, they said, quote, "If the RSGs had been designed and manufactured in accordance with the procurement specifications, the leak and tube wear would never have occurred." That's an absolute disagreement with the AIT report. The AIT report on page 23 says that the replacement steam generator designed and developed by Mitsubishi were in accordance with the licensee, San Onofre's design specification, and were translated into design and fabrication drawings. So I think the AIT would agree that this is not Mitsubishi's problem and that it should not be scapegoated. Both Large and I agree, though, that the problems in the replacement steam generators are not fabrication problems. There were fabrication problems, of course, but it's our opinion that no matter who in the world, and there's about 5 people that can make these, were building these generators, they would have experienced a fluid inelastic instability due to a high void fraction anyway. So the problem is not how they were fabricated, although fabrication problems certainly compounded it. But no matter who built it, these generators would have failed eventually. Now, if it was 6 months or 4 years, that part is uncertain based on fabrication problems. But the high void fractions were built into the design, and the fluid inelastic instability was inevitable in the design. Now, Edison's annual report, going back in time to 2003, states that the Palo Verde steam generators, which are also combustion plant, a little bit bigger, but essentially the same, the Palo Verde steam generators are identical to the San Onofre steam generators. More importantly, they say the replaced steam generators on Palo Verde Unit 2 are of the same design and the same material as the original steam generators on San Onofre. Now, I'll remind you that the replacement steam generators at Palo Verde did go through the 50-59 NRC process, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, but I think it's important to know that Edison has identified one plant in the whole planet that is essentially identical to it, and it's Palo Verde Unit 2. And that's in a filing with the Security Exchange Commission, which supposedly should be quite accurate. So my slide 25 is a picture from the Palo Verde application, which shows a stay cylinder. It's a big hunk of iron. It's huge. So one would think the removal of it would be a big deal. The stay cylinder at Palo Verde was retained. The stay cylinder at San Onofre was removed. I think, and John Large also thinks, that this is one of the causative factors in the problems that were encountered at San Onofre. The stay cylinder, while we're on it, actually goes through the tube sheet. It was originally designed. Remember, the tube sheet is a containment boundary, and its failure is considered beyond imaginable. So it was a key structural support when combustion built these things back in the day when I was young, and actually was in their shops in Chattanooga. But it also goes up through the generator to the tube side and provides a water column up through the center, which in the design has no additional heat provided. My slide 26 says also that at Palo Verde they retained the combustion approach which used egg crate tube supports, which is the tubes on the right. But at San Onofre, the original way combustion built those generators was replaced with a broach tube, which a good approximation is the picture on the left. It's my position, and Mr. Large's as well, that the San Onofre problems were foreseeable. And here's why. The stay cylinder removal and the additional tubes put 4% more heat into the center of the bundle. Now, 4% is actually, the 377 tubes are 4% of the total tubes. So the heat output from the nuclear reactor didn't change, but the location of that heat within the steam generator changed dramatically. By adding 4% more tubes in the center, the heat was the heat distribution was different than in the original steam generators, and more was driven to the center. The other part of that is we need to know that Palo Verde had 10% more tubes and almost 3% more heat, but Palo Verde retained their stay cylinder, and Palo Verde also did not experience fluid elastic instabilities. Edison, on the other hand, destroyed their generator in less than a year. So by adding the heat on the periphery, like Palo Verde did, and because also they didn't go with broach tubes, they essentially were able to avoid the pocket with the high void fraction that was created in the San Onofre generators. So my slide 28 is from another Edison report that was provided by a different person within San Onofre to Friends of the Earth, and it's a contour of steam quality. The stay cylinder would have been in the middle of this drawing, sort of right in the center of that large circle. The flow across. And that large red area is the area where the void fraction is highest and where the fluid elastic instability was most pronounced. By adding 4% in the middle, I believe and large believes that it exacerbated, if not created, the fluid elastic instability that occurred just slightly to the right, as you would expect, because that's the direction of the flow. It was inevitable when you add heat to the center of the tube bundle as opposed to on the periphery that you're going to heat up the center more and create these high void fractions like we see in this Edison drawing. So my slide 29. I think it's important to go back now and look at the letter you received last week. Edison says two things. At the time the RFCs were designed, Mitsubishi evaluated the flow patterns and determined that the fluid elastic instability would not occur. And separately, 3 pages later, they say that MHI provided the thermal hydraulic analysis as part of the original design that shows that there would be no FEI. I think that's an answer to a question that was never asked. I don't care what Mitsubishi said at the early part of the design, but you have to remember that back on my slide 9, Mitsubishi was contractually required to provide something called a licensing topical report that would cover the applicability of 5059. So Edison, in their letter to you, is not referring to the, quote, licensing topical report that they had in the contract commitments, but rather some earlier Mitsubishi analysis, none of which has Friends of the Earth seating. So removing the space cylinder allowed 377 extra tubes into the center. That's 4%. The riser column does another thing. Remember, the space cylinder moves through both on the primary side and on the steam side of the generator. The riser column provides a water void. So the Palo Verde design has essentially a water void through the center of it. I like to think of that as a Jersey barrier. It's designed to keep the flow moving vertically. So now when that's removed, there's nothing on the steam side to facilitate and bias the flow direction. The steam side flow patterns were never established because the space cylinder was removed. So the 5059 analysis should have identified that a high void fraction and confused in and out of plane FEI was inevitable because they added tubes, they changed to broached supports, which also affect the flow, and they removed the space cylinder.
Yeah.
So my slide 30 refers to the Edison letter again. Edison says that on page 9, design changes may be screened out under 5059. I agree. The 5959 process can be a screen if used appropriately. Edison then goes on to say the adverse condition that later resulted in the tube leak was not known at the time the 5059 evaluation was performed. Mr. Large and I don't believe that that's the case. And an example of that is the anti-vibration bars. The AVBs on Unit 2, an AVB is like a giant woman's hairpin, and it peels back on itself. And in the process of taking a straight piece of steel and bending it over on itself, on Unit 2, a distortion was introduced. That was shipped across the Pacific with the distortion in it. But on Unit 3, a different process was used and the distortion was removed. So I believe that the AVBs were, in fact, a test. At least on Unit 2, the AVBs were a test or an experiment because they clearly were modified on Unit 3. We both agree, John Large and I, that these problems were foreseeable in 2004 when the space cylinder was removed, when the extra tubes were added, and when the broached tubes support plates were installed. Increasing the void fraction was inevitable, and of course the increased void fraction then leads over to the FEI. Almost finally, at least finally for the second section, the Edison cause report is just flat out wrong. I'm on my slide 31. I met with Chairman Yasko this summer, and he said, well, we promised the state of California a root cause analysis. And I said, no, you haven't. If you read the CAL requires a cause analysis, but not a root cause analysis. And Chairman Yasko went up and he went across his desk and he found the CAL and he says, oh my God, you're right. He said, but they're the same. And they are not. An Edison employee provided us with another document that had the Kepner-Trigo analysis that Edison used to determine what they consider to be the cause. Now, Kepner-Trigo, in 1976, way back in the day, I was trained in Kepner-Trigo. It's one of the very first engineers in the nuclear community to use it. It's a tool to identify root causes, and it's a great tool. And I dusted off my book. I still had it, and I pulled it out. The pages are getting a little yellow. But I actually have the first edition of the Kepner-Trigo book is still in my bookcase. And so I dusted off the book, and the key point of a Kepner-Trigo analysis for solving problems is that you define the problem correctly. There's a famous saying by Thomas Pynchon: if you can get them asking the wrong questions, then you don't have to worry about the answers. Well, that's exactly what happened in the Kepner-Trigo analysis that's being used by Edison to determine, to compare the replacement steam generators at San Onofre to the rest of the nuclear fleet. The question Edison asked is, what is different or has changed, which is sort of a standard Kepner-Trigo kickoff. What is different or has changed when comparing Song's replacement steam generators to another plant's replacement steam generator? That's on page 43 of their condition report. That's the wrong question. There are no changes between what San Onofre did and what St. Lucie did, or between San Onofre and another PWR. That's almost like asking, what is the difference between my Volkswagen and your Chevy? That they shouldn't be compared. It's an apples and orange comparison. The comparison should be, if you're using the Kepner-Trigo process correctly, is that the original steam generators should be compared to the replacement steam generators. The question should be, what's the difference between the original steam generators and the replacement steam generators? Not between San Onofre's Volkswagen and somebody else's Chevy or Ford. So the other possibility, which would also be legitimate, is to compare the replacement steam generators at San Onofre to the replacement steam generators at Palo Verde. Remember, Palo Verde didn't experience an FEI. I've gone back over the Palo Verde questions, the RAIs that the NRC asked, and they're great. If you had asked the same questions of San Onofre, you would have identified the problems that occurred in 2011, 5 years earlier, and we wouldn't be here today. But you weren't given the opportunity to ask the questions because the licensee didn't declare 5059 applicability. But back to the original slide on this issue of the Kepner-Trigo analysis, I don't think that the promise the NRC made to the state of California has yet been met. There is no root cause analysis for Palo Verde, and there won't be until you compare, not on an apples and oranges basis, but when you compare oranges to oranges, or maybe lemon to orange or whatever. But in any event, the key is to compare to something that's similar, not what Edison did. Now, my slide 33 is an example of this. These are right from the Kepner-Trigo analysis that's in the cause report that was provided to Friends of the Earth by an Edison employee. They have two columns. One is the possible causes, and one is the reason why it can't be a cause. The three possible causes include the issues of the tubes in the U-bend region, the design that was changed by replacing the stay cylinder, and issues related to the support on the straight legs of the tubes. So Edison claims to have looked at things like the replacement, like replacing the stay cylinder. But if you look at the rightmost column, they were thrown out and never analyzed. The rightmost column says that they were not analyzed because they were not a causal factor in the tube wear. That gets back to the wrong question was asked. when you ask the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer. And I submit to you that the NRC's been on that hunt now for 6 months. Instead of comparing the original steam generators to the replacements, or the replacement steam generators at San Onofre to the replacement steam generators at Palo Verde, you've bought hook, line, and sinker the approach that San Onofre would like you to do, which is to compare their Volkswagen, their steam generator, to all the other fleet in the country, and there's in fact no similarities. Okay, my conclusions. I'm on 35. The changes that Edison made were foreseeable. Over the past 8 years, there's been ample evidence from multiple sources that these were not like-for-like replacements. I think that the significant damage that has occurred really clearly shows that design changes did have a significant impact upon the key design functions, and in fact the containment boundary was degraded. I realize that 5059 is not a retroactive thing, and that you, because it failed, that is not an indication 5059 should have been used. On the other hand, both John Large and I agree that in 04, instead of contractually demanding the 5059 be used in such a way that the NRC didn't have to be notified, if engineers had gone in and made the determination first, got the cart in front of the horse instead of behind the horse, we both believe that the NRC would have been notified. And based on the questions you asked at San Onofre, at Palo Verde, I think you would have identified this problem. It's clear you guys were on to the FEI issues at Palo Verde. And Palo Verde, while it did have some tube problems, nowhere it had some minor, like 20 tubes involved in minor problems. The 1,300 tubes that were damaged at San Onofre, Palo Verde pales in comparison. The appropriate analysis would be to compare the original to the replacement, or the Palo Verde replacement to the San Onofre replacement. Edison should have identified to the NRC that this change required NRC evaluation. My slide 36 is that I think we need to admit that this was a near miss. This is the biggest equipment failure since Davis-Besse. Davis-Besse was worse, I'm not denying that. But in the last 10 years, nobody has screwed up a piece of equipment more than the steam generators at San Onofre. My 37, when you go back into the tech specs at San Onofre, they say that the licensing basis is a double-ended rupture of a single tube. My 38, though, shows that when the pressure test was applied, 8 tubes failed, not 1. Now, so that tells me that San Onofre was operating outside of its original design bases since those generators were installed. To date, the NRC really hasn't addressed the fact that you had a plant that was operating outside of its original design bases. Now, 1 tube failed as a leaker. Had there been a main steam line break, it's likely that all 8 would have failed. Then the emergency plans and also operator training is based on 1 tube failing. I've been working with another former NRC expert, Dr. Hoppenfeld, and he and I have concluded that the makeup into the reactor vessel as a result of loss through 8 tubes would have resulted in a serious loss of coolant accident had it occurred. So we're all lucky a main steam line break didn't happen, but if it had, it's likely that the design basis of 1 tube failing would have been exceeded. The NRC AIT also mentions something similar. They say that although in this case, the degraded condition manifested as just a small primary to secondary leak. Parenthetically, I'll add it was growing, but it started small enough that the plant shut down. It is possible that a full-blown rupture could have been the first indication. And that sums up my presentation, my my background's on the last page, but I don't think we need to go into it. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Arnie, very much. I just want to give a bit of a summary of Mr. Gundersen's presentation and its implications for this process. He's presented information today showing that the design of the RSGs at San Onofre in the design, they made changes that adversely affected a design function in that they foreseeably degraded the steam generator, adversely affecting the ability of the generator to contain radioactive steam and water from the primary loop of the reactor. He's also told us that these adverse effects were foreseeable at the time, and time has in fact confirmed that they were foreseeable because we've seen what's happened at the plant. Edison should, under the requirements of 5059, therefore have notified the NRC that it would seek a license amendment back in 2006 or whenever the appropriate time was. Instead, Edison did not inform the NRC or seek an amendment, and that, in our view, is a violation of Section 5059. This body, therefore, should consider appropriate enforcement actions for two reasons. One reason is to protect the health and safety of people in California, and the second is to deter others from making a similar kind of mistake. In terms of what the enforcement might be, we suggest the following. The plant license should be suspended until Edison applies for and receives license amendments that address the changes that adversely affected the design functions in units 2 and 3. And thus the board should order a license amendment proceeding if Edison wishes to go forward with restarting the plants. So that's what we draw from this presentation and from what we've provided before. As I said, we'll be also submitting our own responses to the comments that were filed last week by Edison. So with that, I think we're prepared to take questions from the board or whoever it might be.
At this time, excuse me, since this is a public meeting, I would like to remind the PRB members, the licensees, the petitioner, and other meeting participants of the need to refrain from discussing any security-related information during today's public meeting. Does the staff from the NRC headquarters have any questions for the petitioner?
This is Dave Bollier in NRR, and I'm responsible for 5059s in NRR. Everything you said about 5059 was correct in terms of, 5059 is a prospective, but you need prior NRC approval, and it's not a retrospective. And now you're saying that the licensee was unaware of the deficiency, so therefore they did not evaluate it under 5059 at the time. So they weren't aware of the deficiency till after the tube leak. So in terms of, I just want to understand, why would you think that the licensee would submit a license amendment based on a condition that would not exist on a going forward basis?
This is Mr. Ayers responding. Mr. Gundersen may want to as well, but I think that's how you characterize that. It's not quite the argument we're making. What we're saying is that Edison should have known, if it had done an analysis appropriately here, that the criteria in 5059 were tripped, which then required application for a license amendment, and they didn't do that. They have the responsibility to do that. And in my view, at least, for them to say, oh, well, we didn't understand that because we didn't look at it, is not fulfilling the obligation they have to understand the effects of the changes they're making in the plan.
Yeah, let me expand on that too, can I?
Please.
Yeah, hi, Arnie Gundersen. If I said that, I want to correct the record. I'm on my slide 30, and I read onto the record the adverse condition that later resulted in a tube leak was a deficiency associated with the design. It was not known at the time the process performed. That was not my position. That's Edison's position. That came in the Edison letter you got last week. My position, I thought I went on to develop, was the issue that, let's just look at one example, the AVBs. The AVB on Unit 2 was known to be distorted and shipped across the Pacific, and while that was shipping across the Pacific in a distorted form, it was modified on Unit 3 to avoid the distortion. So it really gets to the point that the adverse condition was known to Edison before these were ever operated, and so I meant to say, and if I didn't, I apologize. I meant to say that Edison's statement just last week is wrong. That the adverse conditions were known at the time these things were being built, and in fact, there's modifications from Unit 2 to Unit 3 to correct some of those adverse conditions. And then, in addition, I would also agree with what Mr. Ayers said, that the analysis at the time it was done, which in my opinion should have been 04, but according to this letter from Edison that we got last week, indicates that the 50-59 analysis might have been done in 08, well after this plant is, this missile's been fired. It's on a ballistic trajectory at this point. It was too late when the 50-59 was done to change the outcome, because Mitsubishi was contractually bound and shackled. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Brian Benny. You mentioned that you're going to continue to give us more information. I just want to put on the record that this is a limited process, and today is really your best shot for providing whatever new information or substantial information that you have on the 50-59 process that was done before the steam generators were installed. And again, this isn't a hearing, so there's still time for discussions here and for you to provide us information. But you mentioned that you're going to provide a response to Edison. I'm just curious when that's going to come in, because we've got to meet as a board and complete our process here.
Well, perhaps you could give us an idea of when that's going to occur, because obviously we'd like to make our response expeditiously, but we want to be sure also that it will be read before the board starts making its decisions. Can you give us an idea of what that schedule is like?
This is Brian Benny. I don't have it scheduled yet, but I have some pressures here to complete the process. Not that we wouldn't follow anything that we found safety related in this respect, but the facts remain that your original petition came in June 18th of 2012. We're now in January of 2013. I'm just wondering how much more information is out there, and when are we going to finally get to see it so that we can make a decision?
As Mr. Ayers, I would expect that we'd be able to respond within 2 weeks from today.
Thank you.
Sheriff, it's okay. I had a question as well. My name is Doug Broadus. I'm a branch chief in the Division of Operating Reactor Licensing. I'm the chief of the Song Special Projects branch. Not part of the PRB, but the question was, does any NRC staff want to ask questions? Mr. Gundersen, you referred to Palo Verde in a couple of places. One, you indicated that Palo Verde went through a 50-59 process, and then in another instance, you indicated
that if the NRC staff had asked the same questions of Palo Verde, that we would have identified these issues. Can you, first of all, can you clarify what you mean by they went through the 5059 process and what you meant by that? And then what questions that we asked and what the context of that is, so that we can be able to go back and look at that information?
We in I think 2001, it might have been 2000, Palo Verde Unit 2 added 10% more tubes to the generator on the periphery, retain the egg crate design, retain the central space or the unit, and also increased power by 2.9%. That whole process, the steam generator modifications and the 2.9% power increase, flagged the NRC, was flagged by Palo Verde, and the NRC was notified. I was going through RAIs on Palo Verde, and there was extensive questions about the possibility of an FEI. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the RAI was, but it was in the RAI process. For people on phone bridge, RAI is requests for additional information. And so in the RAI process, the NRC asked, and Palo Verde adequately answered questions related to flow and FEI questions. Now, I think, maybe in our response back, and perhaps you'll have it before then, but I can identify the specific RAIs that talked about the FEI issues, the questions that were asked.
And just to clarify, I heard Arnie say that, and I thought as he said it might mislead. What he's saying is San Onofre went through an amendment process, went through the 5059, triggered the Palo Verde, I'm sorry. These plants get confused. But it did go through a license amendment process, unlike San Onofre.
And so what they have submitted a license amendment specifically for the replacement steam generators, and the REI questions were in response to that license amendment request. Is that what?
Arnie Gundersen here. There were two issues. The application says to replace the steam generators and for a 2.9% power uprate. Okay. And they are coupled together inextricably. It's hard to say that if they didn't get the power uprate, would they have applied for the 5059 to notify the NRC? But a 2.9% power uprate was part of a 10% tube addition, but those tubes were added on the periphery. The steam generator was made larger on the diameter to accommodate the 10% tubes, whereas the San Onofre generator was increased slightly, but the 4% tubes of San Onofre were put in the center, and the 10% tubes of Palo Verde were put on the outside. One experienced in FEI, one didn't.
Okay. Thank you. That helps to clarify, so we can go back and look at that information more specifically. The second question that I had was, I thought I heard you say when you were talking about the supplemental information, and this is along the lines of what Brian was saying. I thought I heard you say that that you also plan to supplement the information that you have provided to the ASLB as part of this. Is that? Because you referred to other information you provided to the ASLB. Is that?
Well, we did provide an affidavit from Mr. Gundersen to the ASLB. Mm-hmm. I think that's what he was referring to.
Only that you provided some additional information to them, but you're not requesting that to be part of this.
Arnie Gundersen, I would hope you'd read the affidavit to the ASLB, because it is a technical affidavit, not a legal one, and there's definitely a correlation. I mean, we could submit the affidavit again as part of this 2-week response, but it's already known to the NRC, and there's no this presentation today. Plus what was in the affidavit is all I planned to say on the matter, until, of course, Edison modified the record last week, and I think that's what Dick is talking about now.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for us to, if there's specific information and all of what you submitted that you want to make reference to, so we know which information to look at and make sure it's clear. That's all the questions I had.
Yeah, Brian Benny, I do agree. That would be extremely helpful because I have a large pile of paper at this point in time. And based on that large pile of paper, we start back in, like I said, June 18, 2012 with your initial petition. And subsequent things have happened since then, and unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to rely a little bit on your knowledge of it. But in the AIT report that came out, when was it, November 8th? Item number 5, I'll give you the Adams number since I've got it written down here on the paper. It's ML or Mike Lima, if you're into the code. It's 12188 Alpha 748. It's based on page II under item number 5, based on the updated safety analysis report description of the original steam generators. The steam generators' major design changes were appropriately reviewed in accordance with 10 CFR 5059 requirements. Since that report came out, what new information do you have that original 5059 was done incorrectly? Examples that you've got? Any other facts and evidence you want to get in to have the board challenge that statement?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Arnie Gundersen, we filed in July, we filed an FOI and we haven't gotten anything yet. So we have no information from the NRC about its internal processes, nor have we seen the 5059 analysis that the AIT refers to. We are frankly in the dark. We don't know what the NRC's deliberative process was, and we don't know what Edison wrote originally. We don't even know when the 5059 was done. And was it 04 when they did the contract? Was it 08 as suggested in a memo last week? We are in the dark. Mr. Large and I have determined that if we were there in 04 with these changes, our decision would be different. But again, we're boxing in the dark here, and we just have no clue how the AIT arrived at that conclusion.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Ayers again, you should understand, if you don't already, that the Friends of the Earth asked in the ASLB proceeding for a series of documents that were characterized by Edison as proprietary. These would have been helpful, both our experts thought, in understanding what happened as well as understanding the past. The board denied that request. So consequently, we're operating without a lot of information that is available to the Commission and is available to Edison. We think this is not exactly fair, but it does handicap our ability to come up with some new factual gem. Having said that, however, I think the key here on the AIT report, the conclusion you read, is that is essentially a legal conclusion that's stated there. There was compliance with 5059. Yes, there's a technical element to that conclusion, but it's ultimately a legal conclusion. And there was a cover letter with the AIT report in which Elmo Collins, the regional director of Region 4, made that point very forcefully. He said, quote, "It is not the responsibility of an AIT to determine compliance with the NRC rules and regulations or to recommend enforcement action. That will be done through subsequent NRC inspection or review." So I think our point is that that statement, in our view, does not carry weight as a legal conclusion, and what it's talking about is something which is a legal conclusion.
And I think just to clarify that the November 9th inspection report was as a result of a follow-up inspection that Mr. Collins was referring to in that initial report. So there's a distinction between the AIT activities and then routine or even special inspection activities, in that the AIT is a fact-finding mission, whereas the an inspection or even special inspection is you're looking at compliance from that standpoint. So that follow-up inspection was to address those issues that were identified by the AIT in their initial fact-finding charge, basically.
Are there any additional questions from NRC staff? At this time, do the licensees in this room have any questions or comments?
This is Steve France, representing Southern California Edison. We understand that the purpose of this meeting is not to discuss the merits, but simply to ask questions. We have no questions, Friends of the Earth.
NRC operator, please unmute the lines at this time. Are there any questions or statements for the petitioner or the Petition Review Board from the public?
Yes. Yeah. My name's Don. I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, Don Lightning. I'm calling from San Diego. We have issued a NRC AIT review requires an NRR investigation document. I've sent that in. It deals specifically with the 5059 process at San Onofre. It also goes in that the length of the tubes were also increased in size by 7 inches, which exacerbated the problem at the top of the steam generator. Also, in the 5059 process, the NRR technical specialist found 2 instances that failed to adequately address whether the change involved a departure of the methods of evaluation described in the updated final safety analysis report. And we listed those things, and I can provide that to Brian if you want. But there's a wealth of information out there, and I'd just like to say for the other technical people of the public, unless we have access to this information, how are we supposed to make intelligent, helpful suggestions to the NRR and or the NRC to do its job? You're keeping us blinded, and that's not fair, and it's not conducive to nuclear safety in America. We can't afford a Fukushima-type event in America. It will devastate the country. And you have to help.
Oh, sir, we appreciate your comments. And once again, Brian.Benny, BENNEY at NRC.gov is the resource location so that you can provide information, additional input to Brian regarding the 2.206 process for today's activities. I will take a question from the audience. Operator, hold please.
My name is S. David Freeman, and I'm a volunteer helping Friends of the Earth. I have a statement. I think the discussion I heard and the question that was asked by someone from the staff made fuzzy what appears to be the central issue in this case. A utility does not have to know that its equipment will not work in order for it to be different enough to be required to go through the full license amendment process. So the issue in this case cannot be did Edison know that its equipment was defective or was going to get in as much trouble as it has. The issue is whether it was alike the former steam generator, and I think the evidence of the differences between the two steam generators are abundant, and I don't really know that any additional information is needed. This case seems as clear as a bell to me. that it was very apparent that the steam generator was modified in a number of significant ways, and there should have been a license amendment process, even if it had all worked.
Understand. Thank you for that clarification.
I have a question.
Please go ahead. State your name and any affiliation, please.
Rita Robinson, Laguna Beach Independent Newspaper. Was there a 50-59 done in an earlier process that was just not evident? There's some confusion in my mind about that.
This is Doug Broadus. Could you please clarify when you say a 50-59, 55-59 specifically on the steam generators? Is that what you're asking? The steam generator replacements?
That a 50-59 was done. NRC was notified on earlier changes at San Onofre, but FINDA could not find any evidence of that. I'm asking if that's correct.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. Did you understand?
This is Brian Benny. I think I caught it. I think it goes back to, Dave, can you talk about the 50-59 process a little bit and whether or not a 50-59 to replace the steam generators was done at San Onofre?
Yes, the licensee performed a 50-59 and they determined that the prior NRC review and approval was not required by 50-59. There were two other license amendments related to tech specs that they requested and received changes for, but no additional changes or amendments were required. And
just one comment.
Thank you.
One comment. This is Richard Ayers responding. I can understand the confusion because of the way these words are used, but the 50-59 process is an analytical process. The result of that process is either a decision that a license amendment is necessary or is not necessary. And really the question here is whether the right answer was given by Edison. They apparently did do a 50-59 analysis on these steam generators. They concluded that no license amendment was needed. As you heard today, we think very strongly that a license amendment was needed, and that by not asking for it, Edison violated 50-59 of the regulations.
Okay, that helps very much. Thank you.
Dan Hirsch here from Committee to Bridge the Gap. May I ask a question?
Could you please repeat your name and
I'm Dan Hirsch from Committee to Bridge the Gap.
Okay, Mr. Hurd.
I'm quite struck by a Kafkaesque nature of this proceeding, whereby you are asking Friends of the Earth what is wrong with the Edison 50.59 analysis, but you will not release the 50-59 analysis to Friends of the Earth to review or make it public. I was wondering if you could explain why you're keeping secret the central document and then placing the burden on these people to critique something they cannot see.
Mr. Hurd, once again, we're just going to stay within the bounds of the 2.206 process regarding what Mr. Ayers and his associates have discussed before the board. Could you restate your question, please, so that it stays within the bounds of the proceedings?
Well, I think it's clearly within the bounds. The 2.206 proceeding is one in which you're placing the burden on Friends of the Earth to tell you what's wrong with a document you will not permit them to see. So I'm asking you to explain the rationale behind a public agency keeping those public documents secret from the public and then demanding that the public critique something that they can't have access to.
The 2.206 process, this is Doug Broaderside. The 2.206 process is a process by which any individual may bring an issue, concern to us in the NRC. That's the process that we're in at this point, is to understand, to listen and understand the issues that are being made, put before us. And it's not that we're challenging. I want to make sure that that's clear. We're not trying to challenge you or anything. We're just trying to find out what information you have available to help us to get through this process. I want to make sure that that's clear. The licensee, the 5059 is a licensee control document. It's something that the licensee has control over. It's not something that is submitted to us. It is something that is reviewed during inspections by our inspectors because it's required to be maintained by the licensee, to ensure that we have the ability to review that and determine whether they were in compliance in the process that they followed. So it is not something that's been submitted to us that we could make available at that point. It hasn't been submitted to us for our review in that sense.
Then one quick comment here. It seems to me that your system is completely broken if you allow the licensee to make the determination whether or not they have to come to you for a license amendment, and then you keep that secret from the public. So let me make one concluding point, if I may. I think the evidence is just absolutely clear empirically that a license amendment was required under 50.59. 50.59 requires a license amendment if there's a change which could increase the likelihood by more than a minor amount of malfunction of a system safety or a system that is critical to safety, and steam generators are one of those. Empirically, there is absolutely no question that the change that was made by Edison with this new design led to a more than minor increase in the likelihood of malfunction, because in fact it did malfunction. So it seems to me that the question you are asking has been empirically demonstrated by a $1 billion steam generator project collapsing. They told you the change couldn't increase by more than a minimal amount the likelihood of malfunction, and it did increase the likelihood of malfunction by a great deal. End of story, it seems to me.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments. Any additional comments from the public?
This is Dr. Jerry Brown with the World Business Academy. I have an information point related to 2.206 and referring to Arnie Gundersen's slide 38, referring to page 57 of the NRC AIT report, that the degraded condition of the tubes was manifested as a small primary to secondary leak. The whole process here is predicated on the fact that there was premature wear and tear, and that the plant has been, both reactors have been shut down since January 2012. The shutdown, was that monitored due to radiation releases? And this is a question to the NRC staff, monitored by the NRC and or the licensee? If so, is the amount of radiation that released in terms of specific isotopes available to the public, and where would that be available? And what procedures are in place should the NRC allow the licensee to restart the plant to monitor for additional radiation releases?
This is Sher Bahadur. The question you asked would be perhaps the best given to Brian, and you already have the email address for Brian, and if not, I'll ask Mike to repeat that one more time. Let's just keep the questions right now confined to either something where we need the clarification from Mr. Ayers and Mr. Gundersen, or if you need to know a little more specific information about the process 2.206. Would that be all right with you?
Well, I think this question is germane. I think the public would like to know about it. We are in a public discussion, and you've indicated there may not be many more relevant to this case. And I would like to know what the source of that information would be in this discussion, if you could provide that information.
Yeah, this is Greg Warner, Region 4. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
If you look on page 57 of the AIT report under Section 10, it actually addresses your question about radiation monitoring, some of the isotopes as well as the radiation that was associated or potentially could have been received by a member of the public. If you look at that, it should answer your question.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Ayers, I wonder if I might interject a comment on the 5059 point that was discussed a few minutes ago. To me, it seems obvious from the conversation that we've had today that the 5059 analysis that was done by Edison is central to this determination that you have to make. As we've said, we've not seen it. We asked for it in the ASLV process. We agreed to abide and signed agreements to abide by requirement to keep all confidential material confidential and to adopt processes to make sure that it was not released into the public. But that request was denied by the board. I want to suggest that this group, this board, should think about requesting from Edison that 5059 report. It seems to me it's crucial to what you do. I would also ask that when you do that, we be allowed to see the document as well under the same conditions as we've agreed to in the ASLB proceeding. I'll leave that with you. You could make a decision now or later.
Mr. Ayers, your suggestion is well taken. Your suggestion is well taken.
We will have a question from the public here within the NRC facility, Ms. Kendra Ulrich from Friends of the Earth.
Yes, I had two statements I would like to make. The first is that the comment from Elmo Collins that Mr. Ayers had brought up related to the AIT concluding that Edison was in compliance was actually in direct response to the brief that they had submitted to you, the testimony they had submitted to you, asserting that the AIT had made those conclusions. Now, I did want to just point out to the public something that Mr. Brodus had brought up regarding the Special Investigations Team and the November 9th report, which is that it was implied that all of the questions from the AIT that had been raised with regard to licensing had been resolved, when in fact the computer modeling, that was the implication, and you didn't say that explicitly. So I just want to make it very clear for the NRC staff that are considering this, as well as for the public on the phone, that one of the main issues that had been raised by the AIT with regard to whether or not Edison was in violation of their license was the use of the FIT3 computer modeling. That issue was not addressed and not resolved by the special investigation teams and still remains under investigation as to whether or not Edison that should have tripped the 5059 and Edison should have been required to go through the license amendment process as a result of the use of the FIT3 code. Thank you.
Thank you also for that clarification. It was not my intention to say that all issues had been resolved. Sure. No problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've exceeded our time for 2 o'clock. However, we will keep the phone lines open for another 5 minutes in the spirit of openness and communication. Any additional questions from the public on the phones?
Yes, I have another question.
Please identify yourself, your name, and your affiliation.
Don Lightning. I'm with the DAV Safety Team, San Diego. Given the testimony today about multiple, as I like to say, cascading tube effect failures, how is this going to affect the 5059 process, and in the bigger picture, how is the NRC or the NRR going to address safety for all reactors? Because up to now, it's never been proven as a fact, and yet now, after San Onofre's 8 tube failures in situ testing, we have to admit the possibility of cascading tube failures and the effects they might have on the public health. And I don't hear anybody talking about that, and I think I heard the person's name, Dr. Hoppenfeld, as the person who identified that a long time ago. Some of our research said that was, they even had sonic boom.
This is Brian Benny. I'm the petition manager. The reason you don't hear that being discussed today is that's actually being handled under a different process. What we're looking at today is the 5059 process before the steam generators were installed. And, you know, it's challenging for us to keep things separated, but unfortunately I have to keep things separated and finish the process that we're under here for the 5059 before the steam generators were installed.
Well, then I would like to add to that I agree with most of the other commenters today that the system is seriously flawed now. And if Edison gets away with begging for forgiveness instead of asking for permission, you're sending the worst possible message to the industry, because every day they're held up and they can't generate electricity. They're losing millions of dollars. And so you need to make it crystal clear to the industry and the public that's depending on you for safety that if people make changes, they need to ask and get permission and have it reviewed, because the people in Southern California almost had a really bad problem at San Onofre, and they missed by the skin of their teeth. And that's a proven fact. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lightning. We'll take one more question from the public over the phone.
Hey, this is Greg Werner, Region 4. I want to make one clarifying statement about FIT 3. FIT 3 is an unresolved item that is still out there, that is still open. However, it does not involve 10 CFR 5059.
Mike, this is Brian. Can you take one more question?
One more question from the public, please, over the phone lines. NRC operator, any additional public members on the telephone?
This is Jeff Steinmetz. When is the NRC going to...
Mr. Steinmetz, could you repeat your question? You broke up, please. We've lost transmission. We will take one final question from the public within NRC headquarters.
Hi, this is Morgan Lee with the Union Tribune newspaper in San Diego.
Hey, Morgan.
I just wanted to ask if there's a time frame for for a decision on this matter, or what happens next.
As you said earlier, this is Sher Bahadur. As you said earlier, now that we got the additional information from the petitioner, the next step would be for the PRB to meet. The meeting is not scheduled yet, but I may tell you it's not a matter of months or weeks, but I think it's a matter of days once we get the additional information from the petitioner. And I understand it's 2 weeks' time that Mr. Ayers said he'll be providing us additional information. After that, we'll find a common time slot where the PRB can meet. So I think it's just a matter of weeks when we should be meeting. Whether that particular meeting would end in a decision or not, I do not know at this time. It depends upon the extent of information that's put in front of the PRB members. We will know more about this after the first meeting.
Thank you.
Ms. Ulrich.
I just wanted to very quickly respond to what Mr. Warner said over the phone, which is that is incongruent with what's actually in the AIT report. I can go back and look for the language, but it specifically questions whether or not the computer modeling should have tripped the 5059 and whether or not that was a licensing issue. So in any event, I just wanted to point that out.
Dr. Bahadur, would you like to provide closing statements, please?
Well, Mr. Ayers, Mr. Gundersen, thank you so much for taking time to provide NRC staff with clarifying information on the petition you submitted. I think, thank you very much for the patience to sit through this. Thank you, public, for being cooperative and patience, licenses, number of my staff, and meeting is now adjourned.
Before we close, does this court reporter need any additional information for the meeting transcript? Thank you for your attendance. This meeting is concluded. Operator, the telephone lines may be terminated now.